Welcome back. Ed Martin here in the Pro America Report. You know, this story, and there was a column that I read, and I flagged it, and I said I'm going to go back and ask one of the authors, Amy Swearer, who is she's a senior legal policy analyst at the Ed Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at Heritage Foundation. Of course, everybody knows Ed Meese, amazing leader, amazing presence, and his Meese Center is really extraordinary. So, first of all, Amy, welcome back to the program. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
Good. So I wanted you to walk us through this story and kind of pretend we don't know enough, because it happened a few weeks ago. The Supreme Court made this decision, but the decision has to do with the Little Sisters of the Poor who were pushing back. They won finally in the U.S. Supreme Court, but it seems to me these issues around religious liberty are just more important than people realize. So walk us through this case, what happened and what it means, if you will, please.
Sure. So this is a case that centers around the Little Sisters of the Poor. And as you sort of hinted at there, this is a religious organization, run by an order of Catholic nuns, and they're dedicated in a number of ways to serving the sick and the infirm and the elderly. And they've spent now almost a decade locked in a battle to protect their own religious liberty. So the sort of broad overview of what happened in the Supreme Court this last month is that the Supreme Court handed them a victory and said that the Trump administration had the authority to exempt the Little Sisters of the Poor and, of course, other similar organizations like them from a mandate that would have required them to provide contraceptive coverage to their employees that they thought was morally inappropriate. There have been a lot of concerns about some of these specific contraceptives and whether they cause abortions. And of course, there are, with Catholics, some religious concerns with that generally. So they overall earned a victory in the Supreme Court these past couple of weeks. But unfortunately, to sort of add to the story here, their fight is probably not over yet. We will unfortunately probably see them back before the Supreme Court in the future.
Why are they back again? Because when it goes down, there's likelihood that to the lower courts, there's likelihood to be adverse decisions. Is that why?
Right. So basically what the Supreme Court did here is they gave them a narrow victory that said for certain reasons, basically the lower court was wrong, that these exemptions could be provided by the Trump administration. But there were some other underlying issues that the Supreme Court didn't get to, sort of what we consider on the merits of the regulations. These were sort of procedural concerns, but the fear is that when it goes back to the lower courts, the states that have been suing the Little Sisters are just going to go and take some of these underlying issues, sue them again, and start the process over. And so they're going to end up back in front of the Supreme Court sort of on the issues that the court didn't decide this time.
We're talking with Amy Swearer, and Amy is a senior legal policy analyst over at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at Heritage Foundation. You can follow her at Amy Swearer on Twitter. And the piece I'm referring to, it's a good summary piece. It kind of walks through, I guess it's a commentary piece. It's over on the Daily Signal. I'll put it up on social media. It's interesting. Joe Biden said recently when he gets in, he'll make sure the Little Sisters of the Poor don't win this fight. I guess, is there a way that, is there part of this that's discretionary? Is that the point that the next president or administration could interpret something a certain way? Is that what he means, or is he just sort of pandering to the it was not real?
No, so this is actually a very real concern here. To understand this, we have to backtrack a little bit. We have to go all the way back to 2011 when Congress passed the Affordable Care Act. So that, believe it or not, did not have this mandate for employers to provide this controversial contraceptive coverage. That was actually an agency-created rule. So basically, the FDA sort of filled in with this mandate. And so what happened was there was a long fight over the exceptions to that mandate that we can kind of brush over. But what happened was when the Trump administration came in, they expanded the exceptions. They listened to the Little Sisters of the Poor and said, look, we're not going to force you to go against your consciences and your religious liberty here. So they expanded that exemption. So remember, it was an agency-created rule. And so that's sort of what they were fighting about now. And the fear is that if you have a different administration come in, an administration that doesn't quite care about religious liberty, they can revoke those exemptions. They can go back to the original rule, and then they're going to have to fight that out all over with a new administration trying to force the Little Sisters of the Poor and other religious organizations to provide these objectionable contraceptives.
Yeah, it is. It feels like it's shouldn't be an issue, right? That even Joe Biden likes to talk about how he's Catholic and all, and that he's got friends and all. Anyway, but it's certainly a real thing. What do you think of the Supreme Court's term? I mean, I know you're a legal analyst. There's a whole bunch of decisions in there, but it's kind of an uneven one, right? I mean, between the one Gorsuch decision on Title VII, I think it is. I mean, it's kind of a funny term, wasn't it?
Yeah, it has been a funny term. I think on the issue of religious liberty in particular, there were a couple of cases for religious liberty, and that turned out really, really well for the protection of religious liberty. But there are a lot of other questionable things that came out, things like in terms of Trump's tax returns cases, certainly some of the more controversial ones about immigration, and things of that nature. And then, of course, you also had, I know a lot of people who are concerned about the Second Amendment, thought we were going to get a Second Amendment case for the first time in a decade. Yeah. And that sort of got dismissed, and the court didn't take up any Second Amendment cases. So it has just been kind of, again, I think a big win for religious liberty, but sort of questionable back and forth on a lot of other issues.
Again, we're talking with Amy Swearer, and we're talking about the Little Sisters of the Poor. So are the Little Sisters, I'm looking at my notes now again, back at my notes, and are the Little Sisters, they go down to lower court. Do they know, is there any way this is over for them anytime soon, or is this just going to keep going back and forth?
No, and again, this is something that actually, in the opinion, some of the justices brought this up, that because the Supreme Court didn't decide some of these bigger underlying issues, they decided it sort of on limited technical grounds, that it's almost certain that what's going to happen is this is going to go back to the lower courts in the states of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, who, if you recall, it's the states who are suing, not anybody who's affiliated with the Little Sisters of the Poor who are saying, we want access that we don't otherwise have. These are states suing on behalf of plaintiffs who don't really exist. That it's going to go back and they're going to start this whole process over by suing to stop this, again, on those other grounds that haven't been resolved. And so that's why some of the justices actually said, look, we should just save everybody this big legal battle and decide these issues now, because it seems very, very clear that when we get to them, we should be ruling for the Little Sisters of the Poor, that they have a First Amendment religious liberty interest that we need to protect. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And so I think that's a pretty good premonition of what's going to happen, is that this is going to get played out sort of a different day, same story type of thing, where it's just slightly different arguments that they're going to have to rehash.
I know this has been said a lot, but I mean, this is not a new thing I'm saying, but it does feel like it's worse and worse. The process is the punishment. The process of going through asserting your rights in this case, it's good that they're the Little Sisters of the Poor, because they just know what it's like to keep slogging and do the work and not worry. The old Mother Teresa line is, we're called to be faithful, not successful, because, this whole process is kind of, it's almost more unfair that it drags on. And yet here we are. I mean, that's I guess, life in modern America.
Yeah, that is unfortunately, one of the downsides of having these sort of agency promulgated rules, is that, you sort of have these lower courts that go back and forth with it. And unfortunately, you have organizations like the Little Sisters of the Poor who have to continually reassert their rights, because states, again, in this case, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, are just continually trying to bash them down, where it's just this constant fight. And until the Supreme Court actually clearly, on the issues of religious freedom, not procedural grounds, not technical grounds, but on the core issues, says they have a religious liberty right, you cannot force them to violate their consciences like this, unfortunately, this is just going to keep coming up.
Well, it's thank you for what you're writing on it and for coming on. Amy Swearer over at the Meese Center at Heritage Foundation. It's an important issue. I'm glad to sort of take a break and walk through it. So thank you very much, Amy. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a break and be right back. It's Ed Martin here in the Pro America Report. Be back in a moment.